Tea?
Hello.
Chai?
Chai, tea, coffee.
Tea?
Welcome, everybody, and to another fascinating episode of Being in Nature with my buddy here, Zeeshan Haider Khan. He's up there in the nice pastoral mountains of Wales, and he's working on finding a path into a harmonious relationship with nature and plants and herbs. And he's been the recipient of a tradition of herbalism that quietly ran through his grandmother. And she used to, from what he tells us, have little oils that she liked, fragrant oils. And that's all something that's kind of missing is the conscientiousness of the natural world and being able to look at it from a higher perspective, the consecration of nature and the reverence and appreciation of what nature has to offer us can only boost the strengthening effects of coming into relationship with nature. That that the plant kingdom in and of itself is remarkable. I always return to the thoughts of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe when he was communicating with Friedrich Schiller, and he's describing the archetypal plant, Friedrich Schiller, and I'm not quoting it exact. I'm just going to give my memory of it, and that's good enough because the concept's the important thing. But Schiller said that's all well and good, but that's just something that you've put together. And Goethe says, but I see it. And you see there, Goethe giving a hint at how closely he was living with the vital side of nature, not just the physicality of nature. And so much of modern understanding is based on this physicality. And so there's always, in looking at it from spiritual science, there's always that which is coming up from below. And then there's that which comes from above, right? And it's the meeting of them that brings about this experience that we're having. And throughout history, this has gone through a change in our consciousness of it because Rudolf Steiner indicates that in the past, when people were living within like tribal cultures, that they still maintained the atavistic clairvoyance and they were able to see into the etheric world and see the elemental beings. And if you go earlier up, being able to perceive more into the astral, so that these super sensible realms are there. And Rudolf Steiner makes the point that when you go to sleep at night, that's the time in which you come into a relation with the what are grouped as the third hierarchy, which is the angels, archangels, and archai. And these are the beings that bring you your connection to the spiritual world through the agency of Christ, if you're working with the wholesome beings, or something other than that, if you're not. And whatever your path is, that's your business. But
The
I would not,
retards.
I would give the retards. If you want to hook up with the retarded beings, then that's your inclination. You've probably already changed the channel anyways, because you probably think, boy, these people are crazy. So anyway, speaking of that, Sean, how you doing there?
Oh,
Smiling sun
oh,
being.
well, John, thank you for having me and your community. I really appreciate these fireside chats, and I've always loved hearing about von Goethe. I never really knew that he was in, that Rudolf Steiner was inspired by him. And for me, it was investigating like Turner and the color charts and that seeing. And what really sprang to mind for me when you just mentioned the seeing, I couldn't help but think about because I'm here on the mountain, and then you were talking about the angels, and looked up, and there was this like I was thinking about what you'd sent to me recently with the toad, like the manifestation, and how these like the gnomes are not wanting to they're almost like in this push pull between realms and not wanting to, just, I don't know, just seeing the the dragonfly zoom past, but then, which is like the seeing, I'm seeing this like little physical being fly past. He's probably looking for my head so he can bump into me. Done that a few times. And but then the listening, which is like really, like, for me, it's like when I've been amongst people that have been doing the work, developing themselves, as you often mention, deep and wide. And what always comes to pass is that point where you get to a point where you're relaxed and you can just hear, well, I'm hearing it now, it's just the bird song. It's like, where would we be without that song, the birds? And it's just wonderful. So yeah, I'm really good. We're playing catch up. Where me, Kate, the kids are literally just down there. So I come up here to do these lives with you. Probably got about 90% on my phone. We're putting in cabbages, cauliflowers, and things like that today. And I was just wondering what I was going to be bringing to the table today. And Kate was really asking, because it seems like everything's about stories, and we're so bombarded by stories. And I brought this up because we're doing it from nothing as well. We're doing it from nothing except the wanting and the willing to do something to grow our own food. We've got 4 children down there. There's me, Kate, the mother of my 4 children. We've been together since 1994, and we're learning continuously how to grow. So like today, the last few days, we've been learning about pumpkins and squashes, and we're thinking about winter right now. So these are going in, the corn's come out. The corn didn't do too good, but yeah, we're good. John, thank you for asking. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine here.
Yeah,
People
we're
that
all,
people that tune in, they you may find that all the conversations I have with different friends of mine kind of all hang together. So a concept in one conversation can help you understand something I might have said in another one. And in this one, it's nice that it's dealing with this side of nature and that aspect of Rudolf Steiner that's vitally important in and of that he was the person in charge of organizing the scientific writings of Goethe. And Goethe can be seen as the father of the idea of metamorphosis. Specifically, he worked and is known most out of metamorphosis for the metamorphosis of plants, but he also did it as far as the form of animals and human body also, in that he's the one who actually was able to find the location of what's called the intermaxillary bone in the skull, because he had seen, he knew it should be there, and he was able to examine an earlier a specimen of a skull of earlier humanity, prehistoric, and there was still a fissure where the intermaxillary portion of the skull was a separate piece of bone. And so that it actually was interesting that through his understanding of metamorphosis of form, he was able to posit that there would be such a thing, and the evidence ended up proving him true. So you're talking about an individual that's not just your ordinary individual. Within science, he's most known for his theories of color. And he came about with a completely different approach from the Newtonian model of color. And perhaps we'll do an episode on that sometime. It would, to get it to where you could really appreciate it, it would take the whole conversation and then some. But in that regard, in getting into what Goethe had said about the world of plants and Rudolf Steiner's indications, that the plant world, it finds its place within the etheric world, the animals within the astral world, so that the astral gives them the possibility of movement, and the astral surrounds the plant world. And you see that in the shimmering colors of the blossoms. And occasionally it penetrates somewhat so that you have plants that can actually do a motion, like a Venus flytrap, for example. That's due to the astral actually penetrating into inwardness within the Venus flytrap. But when we go to bed at night, our etheric body that we share with the plants and our physical body remain on the bed, while our ego that we've received through the agency of Christ and the astral that we have share with the animal realm, the ego and the astral body leave the etheric and the physical body, and we go into the spiritual world. And in there, we live in the bosom of the angels, the archangels, the archives. And to extend it further, the mystery of birth and death is a mystery that after we pass away, that is when we come into relationship with the beings beyond the angels, archangels. That's where we get into the realm of the exousia, the dunamis, the curiotities, the thrones, the cherubim and seraphim. And so this gives you an idea to work with, as in, and again, I'm just planting a seed here, might open some questions in you as to what that might mean. But there's basically two thresholds you're working with: the threshold of sleep and the threshold of death. And that's a very important riddle that we work on. And I had made mention the other day that to Reverend David that my research in the history of invention, so often keys to important inventions came about as a result of a dream that the inventor had. And so where did that come from? I mean, did that just come from nothing? Or is that something that is a part of this relationship to the angelical world? Whether being necessarily the wholesome guiding beings or the ones that are morality and temptation, has to be evaluated on a point by point basis. You just can't make general assertions. So by coming to an understanding of the principles involved, you can enter more intimately into that relationship. Because that's the language of spiritual science is a language. Rudolf Steiner once called it the Christ language. That these things that may not mean much to us now because they're not derived from the sense of the world, but yet they give it their tools by which we can allow to develop our relationship to the super sensible and bring it into our mind. And so that's the value of that. That's what I accomplished in my books, the Arcana of Light on the Path and the Arcana of the Grail Angel. I guess there's a nice picture for you, and there you have it. That's you having a dream there. Hey Zeesh, so how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, so yes, seeds. Seeds are really important, and we are in our push. Many people might hear my name, Khan, and they might think I'm, somehow Muslim, and we kind of, much like the Catholic and the Christian, what were we before all of that? And I remember meeting my uncle Jim when I was a kid. He was the Afghan part that came over to Wales in the 70s. Our people were originally from Kabul. And I remember my uncle giving me our ceremonial grade catapult. You get ceremonial grade cacao. Well, I was given my catapult. and my hat, and it was multiple colors, very similar to the Indians in America. But I've never really been like, you know, high nor fly like an eagle. But then as we started to investigate the kind of like the Indian path, there was a tribe there because our middle name is Haider. And if you look at one of the great northwestern Indian tribes, there's a tribe called Haider. They're a little bit different to some of the, well, all the Indian tribes are different. These are the ones that live with the Thuja placata, the tree of life, up in the great western British Columbia and all that kind of stuff. And it could definitely be, you know, considered that we could have definitely traveled across from, you know, maybe gone from Afghanistan up through Siberia and crossed over and landed on the continent of America and all that kind of stuff, and certainly found a connection between that. But anyway, John said it, and we're the keepers of dreams. So we're like Yusuf Zai, the sons of Joseph. And so often, like sleep for me is so vitally important. And like I was saying on the last broadcast, I think Tel Aviv University or someone was saying that, you know, if women had higher sources of melatonin, they'd be at lower risk of having breast cancer. And so he just came back round the dragonfly, and it's like he popped in then, and I'm thinking right now about like 9/11, melatonin being the sleep hormone. Where is the highest source of melatonin in the food realm? What kind of foods can we look to that can help promote sleep? Simple foods, things like Montmorency cherry, Uzbekistan cherries. You could think about going out today. There's that saying, when was the best time to plant a tree? Well, they say 15 years ago. I'd say it's 7 years ago if you have a little bit of experience, and then today. So learning about a cherry tree, planting some cherries, learning about a plum tree, investing in organic prunes if you can find them, learning about the seeds. Like in America, you have Baker Creek seeds. It's wonderful. Just go there today and look up the plum or the cherry. Go and learn about those plants. They will help you, because Zeesh does not struggle to sleep. But what I live for and I dream for is those sleep dream where you wake up like a breath of fresh air. Now, I'm just the voice or the ambassador for the tribe of Zeeshan Haider Khan down there. My progeny are down there. Nula, she's now 19. Besnar Bliss, he's now 17. Akira Solar Moon, he's now 13. And my youngest, Ashoka Lotus Ishwara Haider Richmond Khan, he's 5. And he's down there. And we, like John, like Zeesh, you know, we're going along, we go to sleep, we do the connection. So Zeesh now has gotten to this point where I'm like wanting to upgrade the sleep. How am I able to do that? What am I able to bring in to help me sleep the best that I can sleep, that I think we all can do? So spikenard is an amazing oil that you can use before you go to bed. And I actually sell it from, I can set you up an account in America and you can access it wholesale. I can access you this very pure nard that is grown in Nepal, which was one of the Christ oils. And what I like to do, one of my favorite things to do, is a little bit of nard, spikenard, and put it on the crown of my head before I sleep, and sometimes a little bit there. And then I sometimes like to use a bit of mint as well, or this respiratory blend I have. And then I just go to sleep and try and go to bed a little bit earlier than you usually do. Now, in this age and era where most of us have these blue light phones and blue light and smartphones, that disconnect, especially for all of us, that disconnect a little bit earlier, going to bed earlier, and maybe engaging in John's book or the Gabriel's book or whoever's book, where they're offering you the opportunity to learn a cosmology and then the how-to of what you can do to start to pave the way. And I'm going to tell can I tell a quick story, John? There's this one story where I go to sleep, and in the dream I'm definitely in, it's like a reservoir dog. Now Zeeshan on one side has got the Afghan side, but on the other side I've got the Irish and the Basque side. And I'm there in this, it looks like I'm in an Irish churchyard. And I'm in this churchyard, and there's all these elders, and they're in like black suits, because that's kind of like what the Welsh are like, that's what the Irish are like. And they're all wearing their black suits, and they're with me like reservoir dogs, and they're going to me, Zeesh, look at that plant, look at the plant. I'm in a graveyard, and I'm looking at all my elders. I'm like a little boy in the dream, and they're going, look at the plant, look at the plant. I'm like, what is it? What is it? And they're like, and I wake up, and it's the bog myrtle. So I wake up, bog myrtle, and it's like one of those dreams. Anyway, long of the short, that was like about that's about 14 years ago. 7 years ago, come back to Wales, and I end up meeting this lady called Aisha, and planting trees in a 16th century walled garden with a relative of Charlie Chaplin. He's a Basque aristocracy. And and you do get what you think about. You got to sow those seeds. You don't need to know the how, but you water those seeds, and things are going to come to pass. So anyway, I've gone to see this lady called Aisha. She's had children in Afghanistan. Lo and behold, I was delivering to her daughter back in the 90s to 2001 organic vegetables. You couldn't have planned that, could you? And I'm there with her, and she's telling me how she'd had that daughter, Nasima, up in the mountains of Afghanistan. And she tells me all these stories. Becomes like a grandmother to my children. Lovely lady. And I'm in her garden, in her forest garden, with all these beautiful apples and all these plants. I'm like, what is that plant? And it's like dancing. A few plants, I always go for like the ones that are like just, like Vogue, and I picked this tree, and it was the bog myrtle. Well, anyway, plant into the walled garden, and then I look on my daughter's Instagram, and she's singing this song. She's singing these songs of cinnamon. Now, my daughter has been diagnosed with an incurable diagnosis. She has an angelic friend called Snowdonia. She had no idea that the capital of the largest peak in Wales is Snowdonia, next to Cadair Idris. She didn't know that. And then I took her to see a chiropractor, and this chiropractor said, I can see her angel. I said, he doesn't know what we know about this Snowdonia. But anyway, so Nuala sings this song of cinnamon, and cinnamon contains chromium, which is a key something to help strengthen those that have autoimmune diagnosis. Now, the smell of the bog myrtle is like that of cinnamon. And the reason I'm sharing this is because it's like, I'm this, but then, and John mentioned it last time, it's about the children, but then my daughter has been able to decode and decipher the vision, because we're in it together. Like we're not just Zeesh now. It's not just Zeesh dreaming this dream, this heaven upon earth. It's not just, it's me and John, but then it's me and John and our future generations, and what we're seeding out there, and where this vision will go. So today I said to Kate, what can I share today on the live that will be of value? And John mentioned seed, and I just thought, this is so good. You couldn't have planned it. We never plan it, do we, John? We never plan it. And so today, I think it's really important that we all connect to our seeds. We connect to a good seed. We learn. We got to start somewhere. So wherever you're to on your journey, like today, go out and buy a seed saving book and just learn about seeds. Like, this is by a lady called Sue Strickland. I was going to bring John's book up because I really felt it was something that I needed to invest in. A seed saving book is going to be really good. You folks in America had you had this coup of like Chinese seeds coming in, you know, and it was like, what was all that about? There was much more to it than meets the eye, wasn't there? And if they can stop, we've had the COVID pandemic, whatever you want to call it, a reoccurring something by these useful idiots, these retards, and now we're now discussing famine. Glass is going out. Let's start investing in our seeds. Belly up with your locals. Get in your seed co-op, as the Gabriels mentioned. Create your ark. Right now, I'm bellying up with my local community on this mountain, and we're going to start, you know, buying as much organic seed butter, nut butters, almonds, sourcing the organic stuff and building your ark. Get a good vegetable book. You got to start somewhere. This is a really good no-dig book. It's really, really good. That's by a man called Charles Dowding. Learn about growing your own vegetables, and before you know it, you'll have your seed. And I'm just gonna say this: how important? Because me and Kate were discussing this. Why should we be so reliant upon others when it was deemed essential for Walmart and Whole Foods and all the supermarkets? And I have nothing against the supermarket, but you can't go into the supermarket today and find the story about the carrot. One, you're only going to find an orange carrot. You start to get these books, you start to learn about Baker Creek seeds in America or real seeds in the UK. You're going to find out there's white carrots, purple carrots. How important is the story behind your carrot? I can't help but think about the year 1822, because you're going to hear a story from me and John. You're going to have stories. I've got another story, but I'll save it for another day, about another dream that I had. And once we start to bring in the nutrition and the organic food, and we start to value sleep and get the most out of that melatonin, that sleep that's been given to us, and we don't even, do we, John? We don't really know what it is. I don't really know where I'm going. John's got some idea, you know, and I opened his book the other day and I was like, wow, because I started to see that there were Roman numeral links, and you can follow those Roman numeral links, and you can look at the diagrams, and then you just go on this little journey of the diagrams, and you start to like just bring it in. I heard someone say just by having a good book around you is a good start, and John's book's by my bed with a few other good books. So we're asking ourselves, where did the seed come from? Why is it important? And how important is it to teach our kids and to support the non-GMO? And me and John are connecting from across the water, because this is now, we hear about the United, I was asking Kate today, well, what is the United Nations? And so it's important for us now, as our nations, with our 7 generations behind us, but looking to the 7 generations in front of us and bellying up with the jolly farmers. Jolly being the right word. Thank you, John, for that space.
Very nice. Well, you bring up an important point, because if you get into understanding history as a process of metamorphosis and the evolution of humanity within the context of a metamorphosis of being, like, you just can't take the way people are taught to think in a university today and then go back and look at hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt, for example, and assume that they're just like you, only they just don't have a language system that is sophisticated as yours, and so consequently they just made up stuff to fill in the blanks of things they couldn't explain. And that's, to a large extent, the kind of cast of mind of authors that are dealing in scholarly works pertaining to hieroglyphics. I know, because I created a 15,000 database on ancient Egypt and Mesopotamian study. And I looked and looked and looked, and I couldn't find evidence of many that were looking at it in the context of the evolution of consciousness. And an interesting figure, British figure in relation to this idea of the evolution of consciousness is Owen Barfield, who ended up translating quite a few of Rudolf Steiner's lectures. And he was a member of the Inkling, C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and Charles Williams, and that whole group of Oxford dons that used to meet at the pub on Thursday nights and discuss religion, history, philosophy, things of that nature. And it's quite a amazing group of people, and in contradistinction to the way things today have become just so banal. I mean, you watch TV and it's like it's so rare to find a truly engaging concept that isn't steeped in total materialistic cast of thought. And so that you have this dichotomy between the materialism and that which is bearing spiritual impulses. And that's what's going on at the current time, even though one might not understand entirely. Nonetheless, Rudolf Steiner makes the point that in the 1840s, that there was in the spiritual world a struggle between the fallen angels and the archangel Michael leading the wholesome beings, and that in 1879, the fall of 1879, and we're moving into the Michaelmas season here, as it's in the fall, and so consequently, because of the winning, and there's always that image of like, see Michael, he's got the sword and he's pushing the dragon down all over the place in Britain, and that's really Saint Michael and the dragon it's portrayed as, but it refers to Archangel Michael, and it refers to the struggle between the forces, the wholesome forces and the unwholesome forces, which went to a change because you see, in earlier periods, the forces that were approaching the world through bloodlines and all that kind of thing was appropriate until the physical being had been evolved to the point to where it was capable of continuing its growth. But Rudolf Steiner made the point that at the 1879 transition, there was a shift to where the wholesome forces were promoting ideas that relate to the universally human. And that's really important to understand because it's going beyond whatever group, familial relations, nation, whatever, that there's a universally human experience that has to do with developing the relationship to the supersensible world, message that's brought to earth by Jesus Christ, right? And so consequently, like he says, my kingdom is not of this world. And by bringing this sense of the sacred, like what Zeeshan is talking about here, an awareness of that, an awareness of the relationship with the supersensible, it can create a context. And that's the Grail. That's your personal Grail experience, that you're creating a receptacle, something that is capable of maintaining a dialogue with the supersensible. And that's what these tools are. And you can learn to decipher a symbol, like you see a triangle. Well, to a guy who's just a mathematician, it's just, a three-sided image. But if you look at it and you understand that it's an esoteric key, then you see that it's the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But it's also the three higher principles of a human being that in the East are called your Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, and in the West, Rudolf Steiner calls them the spirit, man, life, spirit, and spirit self, and that by understanding those concepts, it enables you to use that as a tool to be able to relate to that supersensible world. And so working with symbolism is a big part of what's expressed in my books, in the diagrams and all of that, being able to learn the language of symbol and the interaction between the straight and the curved. That's a big thing. And but again, it's like Johnny Appleseed planting a seed. You throw the seeds out there; they're not all going to grow. But that's a part of the economy of nature too. So that the seeds that don't grow, they contribute to the general compost of the garden, right? And getting into gardens is such a wonderfully British thing. I mean, back when I was running the Mayflower as a manager, we had a really wonderful selection of books by a woman named Gertrude Jekyll, or Jekyll. And Gertrude Jekyll was the leading garden designer for the estates of the nobility at that time, going back into the early parts of the 20th century, back in the 18th. And her big inspiration, she wrote a book called Color Schemes for Flower Gardens. And she shows how she used the watercolor paintings of Turner as a guide for juxtaposition of placement of colors in her gardens. And it's just an absolutely amazing book. This woman is so eccentric. And so you have a lot of really stately gardens and all that have been developed in Britain. And many of the finest examples were designed by Gertrude Jekyll. And so there is that. And you see that whole idea of the flower as being an important mystery, because within the Rosicrucian stream, there's also the story regarding the lily and the rose. And so the lily is the sixfold, and the lily has that really strong aroma, right? And then the rose has a fivefold configuration, the old ancient Persian rose. So you have the 5 and the 6, and the 5 represents the etheric world, and the 6, like the 6-pointed star, seal of Solomon, that represents the astral world. And so, in being able to live into these symbols and see that they're not just arbitrary, but they are part of the signature of all things. Signatura rerum is the saying in Latin. It's the signature of all things. And one of the books of Jakob Böhme was called the signature of all things. And so it's being able to, like when Rudolf Steiner was a young man and he went to Vienna, he ended up meeting an herb gatherer on the train into Vienna and developing a very important relationship with this man whose name was Felix Kugutsky. And Rudolf Steiner had been clairvoyant from childhood, and this gentleman happened to notice that he had a sensitive young man with him on the train, and they developed a relationship. And Rudolf Steiner comes to find here's another being who also sees the beings and spirits in nature, and he helps in preparing herbal preparations. That understanding is a big part of it, and he guided Rudolf Steiner in understanding to learn the signature of plants. Because if you look at a plant and you see the distribution of the branches and the leaves, there's mathematical ratios that are expressed that are literally expressions of the planet. So you see the word plant relating to planet, and so there's this form relationship. So, for example, with the planet Venus, there's a rotating pentagram of Venus that occurs through its relationship to the Earth, so that there's 5 points of culmination, and so that there's this great celestial pentagram formed by Venus, which is interesting because Venus is often strongly associated with the rose. The rose is considered like Sun Venus, for example. And so you begin to see that the genuine correspondences of the signature of all things, of the signatura rerum, is not arbitrary. And so much of that was codified through an intuitive understanding. They didn't abstractly calculate these things. They were led to them almost. I'm sure often was the case of a dream substance that brought it about, because you see the capabilities within ancient cultures, and they each have their own indigenous foods that they eat, and certain processes that they utilize to prepare their food. And if you go into ancient cultures, you'll say, well, this guy showed up and he taught us how to do all this stuff. Okay. I mean, that's literally what you'll find. And that's what I found in my studies in ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamian studies, ancient India, that there's these initiates that come along, and they have a whole body of knowledge that they bring with them. I mean, you have that in ancient China. You have it everywhere you look. You'll find that there was a great one that came along, or a small group of great ones that brought a body of knowledge that was given to that people in that particular place on Earth. But that whole development has become more cosmopolitan since 1879, so that which you're deriving from below is being ennobled by the free human spirit, that's that Michaelic cast of thought that's universally human.
Mm. Well, there's lots going on in there. What so for me, the rose, because we've mentioned the lily and the rose is really, really important, and the rose from a botanical aspect, because we started off, John mentioned my gran, and all of us, we've all had grans, unless we've been adopted, and then we've even had an adopted gran, and that all happened for a reason. And so granny would always, because I've come from this Afghan tradition, my nana named me. In her tradition, it was up to her to name Zeesh. Now, Zeeshan Haider Khan, and Khan's just a name that we adopted when we came over here. It's actually Razani, which is Raisini. And so my name's Zeeshan Haider Khan, which is like pride of lion, pride of grandmother, which fits nicely into what John's talking about with the Inklings and Owen and the Christ, the C.S. Lewis, Aslan. And so Zeeshan, being his grandmother's pride of, seeks to annihilate that pride. I'm not proud, and strive towards the courage. But as granny, and there isn't a day that goes by, and John's right, the British love their gardens. And I've been blessed, I'm very blessed, and I've been blessed to live around country estates. One of my friends is aristocracy. He's one of the, there's that whole movement from John's tribe movement, that period of like the music that John's into. Over here we had like Deep Purple in the 70s. I always seem to connect to my elders. So like Giles, one of my elders passed on now, but he was linked to Gong, and then Gong is like the Flying Teapot, and all this music like wonderful music like Didier Malherbe, which is like bad weed, and this connection to the music, and the Megan Fair. And so when you go to a British country garden, from that point where the East Indian Tea Company was going over to India, and then they were like making Ayurvedic like illegal, yoga you can't do, all these sorts of things, yet they were bringing back the spices like the cinnamon and the cardamom and the clove and the cassia and the vanilla and all these things, but mostly like the clove and the cardamom, to protect them from the deadly vapors. And you look at the British, like why did they become a British Empire. What was it? you American, you folks over there will have your own. You've got your own very interesting perspective on us. But why were we called limeys? Why did we have a strong army? Why did they go in? And obviously, like John shared with me about the Irish part, they would have been doing that all over the place, drawing in the warriors from those different groups, like what the Roman military industrial complex would do, bring in those warriors, use them like what they did in America to go then and fight and conquer and this and that and the other. But they had the gin with the lime, they had the rum with the quinine, the feverfew tonic water, and all those sorts of things. But grandmother, my Afghan granny, because I want to say focus on this rose, but the granny, so they banned it, they suppressed it, then yoga comes back. You can't stop it, can you? You can't stop nature. You can't stop all these amazing things that have got us to here. And I was reading this morning, because John leaves you a little trail of where you can go off and investigate, and I've kind of got some books through reading John's book and being open to learn, and I've got a whole collection of some wonderful books that came from a lady in Street. And as you follow these books, I was reading this morning how, like, on one of John's YouTubes, he mentions about the Alexandrian Library and his friends saying, well, what would have happened if that had stayed open and they hadn't lost it? But today I was reading something fascinating, and it was about how somewhere in West Tibet, there's like a library, and if you were to go in there, the books that you'd find in this little, like, shanty little kind of like hodgepodgey little something doesn't look like much. And I reckon that's why the 9/11 thing happened. I was going to go into 9/11, and it's like, we've gone in 9/11. The American deep state, Roman military industrial complex, British, United Nations, whatever, has gone in there, and now opium's gone up, fentanyl's going up, all of it's going up. They're trying to wipe you folks out. They're trying to wipe all of us out. But not one of them has used their brain and gone and grown almond, Hunza apricot. John and his Mayflower would have remembered the Hunza apricot. You can't find them anymore. Yeah, they're out there growing bloody GMO weed with GMO this and heroin and all this kind of stuff. And nobody's thinking. And the rose. And Nana would always spoon feed me this rose stuff, because she was like, Zeesh, she named me. Like the Queen was named. The Queen has her jewels. What John's essentially saying is we've been created by design. These royal families know by design 7 generations back who they are. I had to get to a point where I thought I was Muslim. Then I found ancient Egyptian wisdom, annihilated the fact that I was Muslim, came up with some words, asked people, do you hear the word Araman? Because I got given a load of these New View magazines for free from this local eco place. I was like, God, that Aramanic dude don't look too good. What's that? And then the people are going, and all these master degree students, these like wokey types, and they don't like it if I say folks. I actually felt quite good actually listening to the Gabriels, and they go, folks, I'd be like, and Alex Jones, folks, I'd be like, there's my people. And I can say to you safely that you are my people, beyond nations, beyond worlds and universe, universally, you are my people. Because my mum used to go over to America anyway, and she liked all the Motown. I've always had this strange affinity to Detroit, and it's almost like maybe it's just interesting. It's like some sort of great grandparent thing has brought us all together. Me and John even share the same birthday, don't we, John? But the rose thing, I've got to say this, Granny named me, but when I was a kid, Granny was spoon feeding me this rose and honey. Now, in our Afghan tradition, which is similar to Ayurvedic tradition, but it's not Ayurvedic, you ask the Ayurvedic person what they think about us, and we'll say, oh, they're a little bit esoteric, and we'll have our thoughts on traditional Chinese. We've got our own system, like the Ashaninka have their own system, like the Hopi shaman have their own system, like Dr. Bernard Jensen has his own system, like everyone has their own systems. And each system, if you can develop the strength of will and focus and just do it for 40 days, you're going to get something out of that system. And so with our system, which I'm very much pulled by the Tibetan system, but I investigated our system because I thought I was Muslim. I later found out that I wasn't, because I'm a little bit of a monkey. I'll push buttons, I'll ask questions, and if something isn't right, I move forward, and I move forward fast. I go, oh, that's not my wealth. I don't relate to that. Keep going. But I learned some things from that system, and in our system, we use before. I think a lot of these systems have been infiltrated by religion, this modern religion, and I think we've come from something much more perennial, much more ageless, something more beauty, and not so rigid, and maybe a little bit more interconnected and not so divisive. And so Granny would give me this rose with honey, and in our system, an Ayurvedic system too, they say one man's medicine is another man's poison. Well, there's three foods, and John mentioned Venus. I was listening to one of the Rudolf Steiner lectures. He was saying how the sunflower should really be called the Jupiter flower, because it's connected to that planetary influence. And Jupiter is like the yellow. And so, but that family, whoever created those families, that's the sunflower family. And there's a plant in that system called helichrysum. It grows in Corsica, and it's got like this wild horse. It's beautiful. I have it, and I can ship it. I sell the natural medicines because it's safe, they're effective, they're affordable, and I can drop ship them all around the world. And I have a wonderful Corsican helichrysum. It's one of those plants that you want to have it in your cupboard. You won't use it all the time, but it's for everybody. It's for all children. You want it in there if your child falls or cuts themselves. It's a very important oil. It's the sunflower. It's of the sunflower family. They're the everlasting plants. There's another plant then, the rose, specifically the rose. But the rose family, you can think about things like the almond, the peach, the mulberry, the apple, all these wonderful foods and fruits. It's wonderful. But Granny, so rose again is another one. It's everybody's medicine. Now Nana would give it to us. Now this is something that you can all do at home. Go out today, and the British love their roses. John's right. You got David Austin, but you can go out today and find the dog rose variety. They make wonderful hedging. They're very rich in vitamin C. And if you collect the rose petals, what my Nana would do is collect the rose petals and put them in the honey, the raw, unpasteurized honey, and you leave it under the full moon for that cooling effect. You can put it in your favorite glass jar, maybe some Miron Violet glass jar. That's the upgrade now from brown glass, and leave it under the moon. And every season now, what's wonderful is Nanny gave me that 10 years ago. I found out that it was something that she was doing by design, but I never thought of it like that. I didn't know it was this system that had been passed down from the Greeks. And now all of my four children, Nuala, Besna, Akira, Nuala, when she became 18, I said, Nuala, what would you like for your 18th birthday? And we don't have no silver spoons, and we don't get money from George Soros or Billy Boy Gates and his foundation. We very best that we can, and we're humble. And I was like, well, what would you like? And she said, I'd like a rose. She chose 2 roses, but she didn't only choose them for herself. She chose them because she was thinking about the insects. She was thinking about the pollinators. Us. We wonderful garden with the bees. That's so important. And
that was all breaking
on. I
up.
noted how the to Joseph.
Your signal's broken. Can you hear me?
It's like the signal's broken.
We're losing the signal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Whoops.
So it got all it got
Is it
all
slightly delayed?
broken up.
Oh,
It's breaking up.
we've been
So that,
hardcore.
is your battery running down?
Okay. Right. Okay, I'll walk.
Yeah, it's all broken up now. Well, geez. Well, that just gives us something to talk about in future, or here in the States we'd say in the future, but you Brits like to say in future. And so, consequently, as is my wont to say, I want to thank everybody for coming on here, and on the YouTube link for this podcast. Beneath that, you could find information regarding my books, and if you want to buy me or Zeesh a cup of coffee to contribute to all this, there's links for PayPal.me / and then we each have a different handle. Yeah, I guess we'll need to connect there. Yeah. He's trying to come back in. Let me. This is fun. Anyways, that's not working. Okay. Well, there you are. Can you hear me? It's okay. How's your battery? Well, I guess you can't hear me. In any event, here we are. And so, well, I was saying,
Hey, John.
Hey, you're back. You found a signal. I was just going to share some information here. If you want to donate to buy Zeesh or I a cup of coffee, Zeesh is paypal.me /
Hey, John.
Visionary Life Hacks. That's hacks, HAKZ.
Okay. Well,
anyway,
it's
paypal.me / John Barnwell 888.
If we are, I was saying how you can have, if you make the honey panacea, it's very good for you. It's very cooling, it's rejuvenating, and it's cooling, antioxidant. It's good for woman, it's good for mother wanting to have child. It's good for all human beings. It's very important medicine, the rose. But anyway, I don't know if anyone can hear this. So
yeah, it's kind of
John
getting
is there.
The signal's
And
getting
so
a
we've
little.
got the rose. Oh, and then there's fennel. Fennel's related to carrot. And fennel's really important for you as well. The fennel seed. Grandmother would put cardamom, cinnamon. These are really important things that you can use before you go to sleep. So it can help you with the work that you're doing. Anyway, my name's Zeesh. You can donate with the link that John's shared if you want to. We're doing it on next to nothing. Anything, any energy that you put our way is going to help us to grow food in the polytunnel. We're saving for a polytunnel right now so we can grow food for our family, and then maybe from the family and we'll have excess, so then we can start to help create change in the area with organic food, with a story. And on that note, thank you for being here with me and John. I don't know where John's gone. He might even be here, but I'm here, and it was wonderful to connect. Have a great day, and speak to you soon. John's books are really good. Thank you.
See you later. Thank you. Okay, so let me clarify some of that. Sorry about the broken signal. It happens. Anyway, Zeesh's links to donate and mine are on YouTube beneath. And there you can find the information on my books, The Arcana of Light on the Path, The Arcana of the Grail Angel. They're both available on eBay. And you could also check out American Intelligence Media at aimfortruth.org or Americans, the number 4, americansforinnovation.blogspot.com. And also you can go to the Rudolf Steiner archive, and they can give you some background materials to help you understand all this. But I want to thank everybody for coming on board, and hope to see you soon.